Today, we have the opportunity to delve into crucial conversations about the intersection of research, technology, and community impact. We have an exciting agenda planned and designed to increase our understanding of AI and to inspire actionable outcomes for community research. We'll start with an overview of the current landscape of AI and its implications for government and community initiatives, delivered by our distinguished keynote speaker, Dustin Haesler, president of eRepublic. Following that, we'll delve into the societal implications of AI with insights from John P. Nelson, a postdoctoral research fellow at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And then we'll transition into practical discussions about AI in local government, led by Katie Leggett, Chief Information Officer of Woodstock, Georgia, and Clay Pearson, Senior Vice President of Strategic Government Resources. Then Sasha Anderson, a civic technology leader, will guide us through a session on AI implementation, exploring where AI makes sense and where it doesn't. Please use the Q&A function in the webinar, and we'll take a few minutes for questions after each speaker as time allows. After the presentations, I'll tell you about the partnership's Community Research Grant Program, and then we'll move into some facilitated breakout sessions where you'll have the opportunity to engage in focused discussions on specific community issues with each other. These breakout sessions cover a range of community research topics, and you should have all received links in your reminder email to each Zoom meeting. So this is a webinar, and after that, we'll transition into separate regular Zoom meetings so that you can talk to each other. After the breakouts, we won't come back together as a group, but I'll send a follow-up email with a webinar recording to everyone. So we are very excited to have you all here today and look forward to the exchange of ideas and insights that will hopefully emerge from our discussions. So thank you all for being here. And now I'd like to introduce our founding executive director, Deborah Lamb, to offer some welcome remarks.
Thank you, Katie. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation's second Community Symposium, Research Symposium. Special thanks to Katie for putting this together and our distinguished guests. The Partnership for Inclusive Innovation is a public-private partnership whose mission is about catalyzing innovation for shared economic prosperity. Ultimately, we believe that innovation is an important tool that communities of all sizes, of all geographies can use and capitalize on, and that our mission is to really think about how to lower the barriers to entry for innovation and really allow for different types of innovation to flourish. The community is so much of our anchor, and that's why we really want to start with the community with this symposium. Very much about how we can use tools such as AI, such as technology, such as data analytics to really fuel further improvements that improve the human condition, that improve the quality of life. And we're just thrilled that we have such really great subject matter experts to base this on. And the goal of this ultimately, as Katie will say, is to really create more public-private partnerships, right? How can we really start with a community problem? And then from that community problem, think what kind of multidisciplinary applied research can be utilized to not only benefit the community in terms of co-creation and advancement, but really think further into research applications that make the research better. And that really can catalyze competitive research across the board. So with that, I will turn this back to Katie, where she can share a little bit more about the partnership at large, but really looking forward to the discussions that we'll have today and the learnings and sharings that we'll have. So thank you.
In our third year, the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation continues to pursue the mission we have worked to advance from our inception: lower the barriers of entry to innovators, foster non-linear paths for innovation, and innovate to do both well and good simultaneously. We do this through public-private partnership, combining financial resources with social capital and leveraging the expertise of our inclusive innovation ecosystem. Our work is based on 4 pillars: workforce development, student engagement, community research, and economic opportunity. This year, we supported and stood up more than 100 projects across 129 project sites in all 12 economic development districts in Georgia. Here are some of their stories. The workforce development pillar targets early career professionals in IT, cybersecurity, clean tech, and AI manufacturing to place them in public-private sector rotations.
Within the first 8 months of my fellowship, I led K-12 tours of the Artificial Intelligence pilot facility, successfully developed and submitted a proposal for a competitive clean technology grant, and I utilized my technology skills to reduce waste at Frudenberg NOK.
This year, our student engagement pillar supported more than 60 student interns over the course of the summer, including an internship at the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge.
The Partnership for Inclusive Innovation Student Engagement Program helped the Okefenokee Swamp Park and our partners review data, draft a UNESCO World Heritage Nomination package, lead interpretive trips in the swamp, meet with many community members, hosted legislators at the state and federal level, and provided a myriad of educational services whose impact will make a difference for generations.
The City of Warner Robins, Georgia Tech, and Middle Georgia State University created a dynamic digital twin with 20 license plate reader cameras that improved the safety in the community, helping identify and catch criminals and return stolen property. In 6 months, cameras led to the recovery of 27 stolen vehicles and also helped locate missing persons, respond to assaults, advance code enforcement, and even reduce animal cruelty.
It's absolutely amazing how big of a deal that is when you can drop crime that much. That is the type of statistics that we can show the community of why it's a benefit, as well as to show the services, hopefully so that it can be replicated in other communities for their own benefit too.
Finally, in our economic opportunity pillar, Minicity has worked to enable cities, clinics, shelters, and homeless care providers in their efforts to assist, track, and innovate for those they serve more efficiently.
One of my favorite stories is of a single father that was able to obtain ID via Minicity and start a new line of work as a truck driver, and also move into his first apartment with that same ID.
Across our 4 pillars, the partnership has made a substantial impact in 2023. 38 technologies and innovations activated, more than 620 businesses supported, 104 access to capital opportunities. This year's grant support totaled $2.3 million. It has resulted in another $17.3 million in additional investments. And that doesn't even begin to count the stronger social capital that is being built by empowering more people and organizations to come together through innovation and public-private partnerships. More than 150 students employed on projects, 34 different institutions of higher learning, more than 45 multidisciplinary researchers. We are proud of what we and the innovators we have supported have achieved this year. In the coming year and years ahead, we look forward to finding new ways to reach an even broader group of innovators, to create new opportunities and advance even greater shared economic prosperity for all.
I would now next like to go ahead and introduce Dustin Haisler, our keynote speaker, to tell us a little bit more about AI in government, or to tell us about AI in government. And so thank you so much, Dustin. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Katie, and great to have the opportunity to share a little bit about what's happening in the world of AI and this wild ecosystem of government technology. So AI is such a prominent force right now that we actually stood up a new research center for the first time since the internet came out within our company to really focus on a new technology and how it should be ushered into the public sector. And so that is called the Center for Public Sector AI. Now, I want to start with just what's going on. I mean, as you see the media and catch news and read GovTech and Governing and all these other great publications in the market, everybody is talking about AI and everyone is talking about generative AI and things like ChatGPT and other things. And I just want to kind of talk about what's happening and kind of how things are evolving and what this really means for the public sector. But I think first, let's start with just generative AI, because oftentimes, you know, when you think about AI as a category, there are a lot of other subcategories that make this up. And AI is not new, and generative AI is not new. It's just kind of hit this tipping point from an adoption standpoint that has been incredible. Now, all you need to know, and the most technical thing I'll tell you today, is that what you hear in terms of generative AI, which is all about human in the loop, basically using AI in order to create new things, new content, new text, new audio, new video, new code, whatever it might be. This is a subset of AI that sits at the intersection between two different subdomains, deep learning and natural language processing. And it's all about trying to leverage your natural language, the way that we talk to each other, in order to create new things, trained on an entire, preset language model or series of language models as a part of it. And so when you think about all the other domains of AI, there's machine learning, there's all kinds of other aspects of it that have been in place for a while. And this is kind of some of the challenges that we have today, even when it comes to regulation, is like, where's facial recognition? That's not a form of generative AI, but it is a part of artificial intelligence as a domain. So just know the definitions are important. And what I'm going to focus on today is kind of this rapidly moving generative AI subset that's happening. And why it's unique. I mean, I think as you think about how we access the internet and how we access information, traditionally you go to a place, you access stored content, you consume content where it is been posted, right? And generative AI allows us to enter this era of hyper-personalized experiences where your view of the world may be completely different than mine based on your preferences. And think of it like Google Translate. If you use Google Translate or another type of online translation service, it's going to customize your experience and automatically translate language for you. Now imagine if you applied Google Translate to everything and you could have it adjust your entire experience based on your preferences and what you were interested in. That's where we start to get into this world of generative AI. I like to equate this to AI kind of being the beginning of the post-search era. So think about it in this way. When you want to go and find information, what do? You go and search for it. You query your own kind of destiny. And you'll go to Google or a variety of other search engines and you get a list of results. And then you sift through those results and decide which one actually solves the query that you originated, right? And so generative AI is a little different because rather than getting options, generative AI, if I took kind of that same query about what are technology priorities and spending in state and local government, and I asked ChatGPT, this is all about giving me a point of view, not a list of sources, not a list of potential things, but a matter-of-fact point of view on something based on its underlying language model that has been put together. And so, now it's pulling together, here is its point of view on that same query, and it's giving me different things. Now, this is where things get interesting because this could be wildly right or it could be wildly wrong or it could be a combination in the middle, but you don't know because you don't have all of the source information around it. Now I could tell it to go browse and to pull data back from the internet, but it still will respond in definitive ways. This is the source material. This is what the answer is to that. And so I think it's a really interesting and unique time to have technology that we can interact with in that way. Now, there is a slightly scarier version of that that's emerging too, and this is where we get into agent-based AI, which I'll talk about a little bit more so, which is where I can give it a goal, like I want to know state and local government, what their priorities are, and it will assign a series of tasks for itself and begin executing on that and researching from the internet. Now, this is where instead of me having to prompt or go to a certain website and do this one-off, it's taking that one goal that I gave it and just continuing to dig deeper and to do research and to bring that information back and to execute on these tasks that it's creating for itself. And so, again, this is evolving so rapidly because what started as a single place that you could go, whether it was through Bard or ChatGPT or Bing Chat, has now evolved into a variety of new ways that you can access and interact with generative AI solutions. And you always don't have to go somewhere to do it. And now, some of that can be done for you in an automated way. Now, I think what's important to remember is that AI will not be a separate product. And this is very important because when you think about disruptive innovation and emerging technologies, oftentimes we think, it's something I'll procure, it's something that I'll bring in, I have a choice. AI will become embedded a part of every product experience that you have. So when you think about all the existing apps that you use every day for your job, you will see increasingly elements of artificial intelligence and generative AI invade that application layer of how you access the world around you. I mean, look at what's happening even to search. If you go and search at Google today, and I take that same query that I did earlier, rather than just getting a list of, responses, I'm now getting generative AI summaries that I can enable, which are trying to, give me that matter of fact point of view based on all of the search results that are there. So again, everything is changing around us very rapidly, and it's creating new conditions and expectations. Now, one example of what that looks like in the application layer. So if you're saying, well, how does that work? I use Google Docs or I use Microsoft Word. Well, you're going to start to see the ability to, prompt within these applications. So if I wanted to ask, my boss for a raise, I could actually, instead of starting with a blank slate, say, hey, here's a little bit about me and how long I've been here. Write a letter asking for a raise. Bam, I've got it in the application. And then I can start to interface with it differently. I don't have to prompt engineer. People that say that prompt engineering is the future career, I think are wrong, because everything you see on this drop-down menu here is a form of prompt engineering. I don't have to know any special lingo or syntax or anything else. I just am interacting with this entire AI apparatus, and it's made it very easy, just like I'm talking to someone. And so it will increasingly become more easy as, I can change the tone, and I can summarize, and I can elaborate, and I can turn it into something else. So there's so much that's here. And again, the barrier of entry continues to fall. The complexity associated with using these tools continues to fall, and you don't have to be an expert. My parents use ChatGPT, and they'll use it, of course, to like write birthday cards and other things, but they're very quickly learning, hey, I can take a picture of my fridge and get recipes that I can make tonight based on the ingredients that are there. I mean, these are some really interesting use cases. So how things are evolving. We started generative AI with really standalone AI. This is where you go to a place and you use AI separate. So like ChatGPT, Google Bard, Bing Chat, those types of applications. And we started to bring these applications into what we already use, like Copilot, which enables you inside of Microsoft Office to have access to these tools, or GitHub's Copilot, or Google when they started with Duet AI through Workspace. So these are starting to kind of get into the existing apps that you use. Abstracted AI is also quickly emerging, and this will be kind of the year of that, where you'll start to see the devices that you use every day, like your phone, will become increasingly enabled by generative AI solutions. So, some of these chatbots and voice assistants of the past that haven't worked that great are going to all of a sudden become a lot more helpful and useful, where everyone, in essence, will have an assistant in their pocket. And then autonomous AI is kind of what I showed you, where I can give it a goal every day. I want to know what's happening in the world of government technology, and I want it to pull that for me, and I want it to summarize it in smart brevity and send it to me at 6:30 on my phone in the form of a text message. That may sound like a complicated series of different instructions that someone would have to do for me, but that is where AI comes in, where it can personalize the way that I consume information online, the way that I interact with the world around me, and the way that I'll interface with government in the future. Now, what's interesting about generative AI is that traditionally disruptive technologies, have been either like a one-off application like Uber, or a major technology like cloud. But what we have here is an explosion of innovation that's happening on the front end with new capabilities that are emerging. So people are building new applications and all kinds of things, and the back end. We're seeing evolutionary leaps of advancement with artificial intelligence across all categories in the back-end infrastructure as well, which is why now you can use generative AI for text and code and image and video and 3D modeling and data analysis and all kinds of new areas. It's not just a one-off or one single application. It is a tipping point of progress that's happening with this technology that's unlocking a lot of new possibilities. And that's where you're starting to see, all of these new companies emerge in the market that are leveraging, some of the big infrastructure that's out there, whether it's from OpenAI or Google or others. You're seeing people build on that. So it's kind of like the App Store moment is hitting the artificial intelligence, wave today. Now, how's it being used in government today? This is something we get asked about a lot. We do a regular series of benchmark surveys to try to understand this. We started with just, asking government how familiar they are with things like generative AI. And, the vast majority are somewhat familiar, but you have this kind of core group here that are not familiar. It's a new thing. They've heard of it maybe one or two times, but they may not be using it on a daily basis. Then we wanted to find out, well, are people using it? Maybe they may not be using it for work, but are they using it personally? We did find that the vast majority of government employees that we surveyed have personally leveraged these tools. And actually, when we kind of dig into that, it's interesting to see that personal use sometimes, skirts on work use too, when it comes to just copy editing or administrative functions that are there. So fascinating to kind of look there. Then we wanted to look at, what does government think these tools are for? There's so many capabilities here that you can use generative AI for. What do they perceive to be the value? Constituent engagement, chatbots, number one, administrative assistance, number two, predictive analysis, and then you get into cyber. So a lot of different use case, emerging here. And again, it goes above and beyond that. This is just based on government's current knowledge of the applications that are available to it. There's so many new things that are emerging here that are going to be game changing for the public sector as well. When we asked what tools they were using, of course, the lion's share of the market is using ChatGPT. But there's, a lot of other things that are emerging there too that people are starting to experiment with. And of course, the market continues to change naming conventions for some of these technologies, which makes it fun to keep up. So as we look at how prepared organizations are for generative AI, this is where we start to get into the real opportunity and also the challenge that we have. The vast majority of our respondents said they're not prepared. We saw 41% say they're not prepared at all. So this shows the need for policies and guidelines and other types of things in place to make it easier for people to know what they can and cannot do with these technologies. And when we asked about, do you have anything in place? There were a small kind of minority that are ahead of the curve and have issued guidance like San Jose and others. But we did see that, there are a lot that are working on policies today, but the vast majority don't have them because they don't know where to put this and where it fits and who's responsible for the implementation of it. Is it IT? Is it procurement? Who ultimately is responsible for how AI is diffused within the public sector and the records retention components and other things associated with it. So I wanted to just share some kind of quick things that we're seeing just from an editorial standpoint. I mean, GovTech and Governing, some of our flagship editorial products, are covering this space and looking at, how people are using things. And, I think the first thing, as we talked about from a regulation standpoint, there's a ton of regulations that are emerging. All the states that are in session have started to move on generative AI and AI as a category, but we still struggle with definitions. Kind of back to the original thing. What are we regulating? Are we regulating all AI? Are we regulating a subset of it, like generative AI, where there's a human in the loop? Are we regulating, the autonomous AI or agent-based AI, where it can go rogue? A lot of different things here. And I think this will be kind of a minefield of fragmented legislation. I think as we also look at states and cities that are moving on regulation, a lot of them at the state level issued executive orders, basically creating task force or other groups to study it, to inventory it, and to kind of make recommendations. At the city level, we've seen a mixture of, both the task force side as well as just, saying, hey, we'll give you some interim guidance. We want people to use it and to experiment because it can help with some of the workforce challenges we have in government, but we need to be careful and make sure you don't put any type of personally identifiable information within these systems. So, a lot of city examples of policies that we've been curating as well. Now, as far as how people are using it, I mean, when we think about use cases of generative AI, it's important to understand that it goes well beyond just having ChatGPT copy, edit, or write you something. Generative AI has the ability to augment people, knowledge, and experiences. And so when you think about people augmentation, I mean, this is empowering employees to be able to make data-driven decisions without having to be an expert in data science, administrative augmentation, enhanced customer service, taking some of the repetitive functions like records management and being able to use technology to automate some of those functions. That's where we start to get into some magic. Knowledge augmentation, think about all of the knowledge and institutional knowledge that government has. How do we leverage these tools so that we're all the smartest individuals in the room? So, if I'm trying to make a policy change or something else, rather than being afraid to ask a dumb question in a council meeting, maybe I can query these things on my own to find out, hey, when did we pass that ordinance? What was the impact? What was the original problem we were trying to solve? Did it actually solve that problem? Everyone can now leverage government data in a new way. We think about the problem with open data historically has been data literacy and the ability for people to take that data and to do something with it. Now we're starting to see some interesting use cases where knowledge can be augmented. And then experience. This is where, when you think about accessing these services, me accessing ChatGPT or Google's Gemini or other things means that I'm not going to a government website. So if I'm using that to say, hey, what's the ordinance or rules and regulations about setbacks from my shed based on where I live? I'm leveraging generative AI as a way to interface with government data and government information and maybe government services in the future. And so I think it's important to know that the future isn't going to be 19,000 cities having 19,000 websites that they continue to maintain. It's going to be figuring out how to build the plumbing for me to use maybe Siri GPT on my phone to access and interact with government. Now, we are seeing a lot of agencies experimenting, and they're working with startups, and they're doing a variety of things. This New Hampshire city is working on a way to basically leverage AI and generative AI to do plan review, to basically take submitted plans, to look at the requirements that are there, and to leverage a vision-based form of AI in order to determine whether or not these plans are compliant. We've got the traditional kind of AI chatbots. Chatbots aren't new, but having chatbots that are smart is new. And so ones that you don't have to program the tree of, frequently asked questions or other things. This allows a lot of, agencies to now have access to some scalable infrastructure where people can ask questions 24/7, and you don't have to worry about, staffing call centers for non-emergencies. So we're seeing a lot more of that. Language translation, Google Translate can only go so far, but the translation capabilities of generative AI and the ability to then add on things like reading level and preferences and information delivery. I personally love smart brevity as a format of consuming information, so I can customize the way that I interact with government information on the fly using technology. And so there's a number of agencies like the Department of Public Safety in the state of Minnesota that's using this. Even, when it comes to the vision dynamic, analyzing body cam footage, some of the repetitive things that we have to do in government and some of the mundane things that we have to do in government, how do we use AI to scale that and to add, a greater degree of independence and to eliminate, the potential for human mistakes. And then we're seeing people create their own, right? Like this is San Francisco GPT. This was one that was created by just a developer that was online that accessed San Francisco's open data, and they created their own version where you could ask anything about San Francisco, leveraging their open data sets, and have a conversation with the data itself. So, people are going to start to build more of these too if agencies don't do it as well. Now, there are challenges that are emerging to be aware of. There's, of course, disinformation. I can create very hyper-realistic, things here. I can create, major disinformation campaigns. We expect to see a lot more of this around the elections this year. Procurement is another big one. What happens if a product that I'm using just all of a sudden gives me an AI feature? What's my responsibility to test that, to disclose that I'm using it, to ensure that it's not biased? It's no longer just I'm going to buy a separate box, but now this is coming to our existing products in the form of software updates. And what's our obligation and responsibility in government to ensure that these updates are actually not biased and that have been trained, and that there's transparency on what models are being used. There's a lot of cybersecurity things that are emerging too. Those Nigerian prince emails with bad grammar of the past are going away, and people are using things like Worm GPT and Fraud GPT to create very good, compelling phishing campaigns and other things to try to get you to click on things or to buy gift cards or whatever it might be. And so we have to think differently about our training and our cybersecurity kind of apparatus that we've got within the public sector. So, when I look at some of the most pressing issues that you all should be prepared for, I think number one, procurement. We have to think about how we deal with procuring and disclosing AI. We need to ensure that we're indemnified from a public sector standpoint from copyright, intellectual property, other types of things with our use of AI. We also need to be prepared for BYO AI. It's kind of like when BYOD, when people were worrying about employees bringing their devices to government networks, that's come and gone, and we've admitted defeat. But now, what happens if someone's personal model, their personal administrative assistant that they might be using from Meta, is a great tool that they use to help them with their job? How do we deal with that? How do we interface with that? What are our requirements to store records? What if people use their consumer AI to do their job better? Or if I use a consumer AI as a citizen to interface with government, what's my obligation as an agency to maintain records? So a lot of big ethical questions here we have to answer. We also need to update our privacy policies to account for AI usage and what our data training is going to be. Am I using constituent interactions in order to train an underlying model? I may not be, but are my partners? And what is the assurance that I have for the public on that? And then I think we need to also focus this time on, how do I lower the barrier of using AI in my organization, provide some initial guidance, but also work on reskilling and upskilling and empowering my people to go and to test and to learn and to bring that back so that we can figure out ways to use these tools as a way to do good. And I think, kind of what I want to leave you all with is that this moment is not new. Now, it is unprecedented in the fact that so much is happening right now within the public sector. But I like to equate this to what we saw with Uber in the past. And if you recall, when Uber was rolling out across the country, agencies took one of two paths. They either tried to block it and ban it and restrict it, and that didn't really work. It was actually more free advertising for Uber because they were a disruptive force. It was a new way of doing things. Those agencies, though, that chose to experiment, to create regulatory sandboxes, to try to figure out where it fit and whether or not it fit into existing regulations or needed new regulations, ultimately prospered because they were able to understand the technology better. And you can't regulate what you don't understand. And you can't truly unlock your potential if you don't have an opportunity to understand it as well. And this landscape is moving so quick. So I encourage you to think about it in the context of what we saw in the past, that this isn't a ban and sit on the sidelines and wait for someone else to figure it out moment. This is we have to dig in, we have to learn together, we have to, identify use cases that work for our respective agencies and their purpose. And I think it's a great opportunity as we think about the workforce challenges that we have in the public sector today and the needs to augment our people with tools that allow them to have greater superpowers than they already have. So this is our next, kind of Uber moment that I hope you'll all take an opportunity and lean in on. So with that, I think we've got a few minutes left for some questions, but thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're seeing in GovTech as it relates to AI.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dustin. And we do have time for a couple of questions. The first one is AI limiting human creativity and research potential?
Yeah, great question. I would say no, and I'll give you an example. So at eRepublic, our design team reports to me, and I came to our design team a few months ago and said, I'd like you to learn DALL-E in Midjourney. And these are tools that can automatically create AI images. And so, of course, the first response was, well, that might take our jobs. What is that? But I had to kind of take a step back and say, no, I want you to learn this for you. Like, are these tools that you could use in the creative process to do your job better? I'm not looking at using these tools in the place of you. I want to use these tools to help you, to augment you, just like Photoshop is, a super tool for designers and creators. So I kind of gave them that as a starting point, and they began experimenting. And what happened next was nothing short of miraculous, where they came back and they had learned so much. And they had, like I was telling them here's how you prompt engineer on Midjourney and other things. And they came back and were showing me things I was doing wrong on some of these systems. And they have fully leaned in and embraced it as a brainstorming tool and as a tool that can allow them to chase some of their creative hunches without having to start from a blank slate or having to go to like a Shutterstock and, getting some, initial imagery for design inspiration. So it's really been an incredible tool for them. In fact, they kind of came back for our budget this year and they're like, can we get access to all of them? Like all of the tools that are out there. We want to learn, we want to experiment. So I think it's, to answer your question, it's in how you frame it. I think if you are, upfront and transparent with how you're looking at using it, generative AI is all about human in the loop. It's all about augmenting people, and it's about giving them new capabilities that they do have on their own, but giving them new capabilities that allows them to scale better, to be more effective at what they do. And so, just from that personal example that I have with my design team, it's been incredibly impactful for them. Even with our research team, we're not using generative AI to create first-party research, but it does help if we're, looking at a survey instrument and we're trying to, gut check, hey, these are the types of things that I'm looking to validate. Does this instrument properly address that? Are there bias in the questions or the ways that I've worded it? So I think there's a lot of, potential there to kind of leverage these tools just as another safeguard.
Awesome. Thank you. And I do want to keep it on track. So I see there's a lot of questions coming in the chat. So I don't think we'll be able to have Dustin answer all of them right this minute, but one of the breakout sessions is going to be continuing the conversation on AI. So I hope you'll come to the breakout sessions to answer those. But let's just take one more. The second one here is the AI movement increasing our capacity to address structural inequalities in society, or is it furthering harmful power dynamics across racial and economic lines? That is a big question.
Yeah, that's a big question for 1 minute. But I would say the challenge today is that it can actually further create harmful power dynamics if we're not careful. Now, why I say that? Generative AI is, in essence, trained on all existing knowledge that's online. And if you look at the internet is a minefield of inherent bias from humans. And so I think as we think about how we weed that out, it's not just in the matter of prompting, but also in the way that we structure the underlying, data itself and how we access that and how we clean that. And everybody's got a different approach to it. And there's a lot of academic, research on this. So I would say it's something that we need to be cognizant of. It's something that we need to, from a procurement standpoint, weave in to ensure that those types of things are dealt with. And we may not have all the answers today, but I think over time we'll gradually learn that. But if you just take it for what it is today, it is a reflection of all of the good and the bad of what we've put online. And so that in itself is not a strong enough database to leverage. If I were trying to use it to set bail amounts or other things for defendants, it's going to take all of the inherent bias associated with previous human decisions and incorporate that as an aspect of what it might recommend to me to set. So I think we just have to be careful and ensure that we put safeguards in place for it so that we don't create those continuing power dynamics.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a good answer and a really good lead into actually our next presentation by Mr. John P. Nelson, who is going to tell us about, what we all need to know about artificial intelligence. Welcome, John. Thank you so much. Would you like to go ahead? And thank you so much, Dustin.
Get my slides sharing. Okay, I look good. Everything visible?
Perfect.
All right, excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Katie, for the opportunity. And thank you, Dustin, for that really interesting presentation. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Georgia Institute of Technology's School of Public Policy and Georgia Tech's Ethics, Technology, and Human Interaction Center. And my job is to study social and ethical implications of artificial intelligence under the Georgia AI Manufacturing Project, which is a multilateral project across a number of organizations in Georgia intended to develop Georgia's manufacturing economy. Today, I'll be talking about some of the most important opportunities and risks that artificial intelligence holds for Georgia citizens. And although I'm the one speaking, I do want to take a moment to emphasize that this presentation represents a group effort shared between myself and my colleagues Justin Biddle, Olakide Ologbade, and Philip Shapiro, who are also at Georgia Tech. I'll get right into it. I have 6 main topics to talk about relative to AI: healthcare, education, privacy and autonomy, economic development, jobs, and government. As I discuss each, I'll show one slide that summarizes some of the main opportunities and risks, a second slide showing some high-profile examples from the news, and a third including some examples of relevant policy actions, which are all at the state or the national level. Getting right into it, within healthcare, there are many potential benefits for AI, which include improving disease diagnosis, reducing the costs of routine treatment, and facilitating medical research, whereas risks include such things as bias and discrimination, exacerbation of healthcare inequalities, and over-reliance on artificial intelligence, which we'll see coming up again through the other categories. For one example of potential benefits of AI in healthcare, preliminary research suggests that AI systems can significantly improve the early detection of sepsis. Now, sepsis is a condition in which time of detection is very important for treatment effectiveness, and earlier detection has the potential to save thousands of lives. And there are also efforts underway to develop and improve AI systems for diagnosing various cancers, in particular skin cancers, which could be detected through AI use of images. And there is a lot of optimism among researchers that AI could be used to more effectively diagnose and to treat disease. However, at the same time, healthcare algorithms can make serious mistakes, especially if they're trained on biased or otherwise inadequate data. These kinds of mistakes are problems on their own, and they can also worsen healthcare disparities. For example, several studies have found biases in diagnostic AI systems used in dermatology. Systems trained mostly on lighter skin samples tend to make more mistakes in diagnosing darker skinned patients. And similarly, in 2019, a major study revealed that a commercial algorithm used to judge the health needs of millions of patients systematically recommended less care for Black patients than for equally sick white patients because it was trained on historical data wherein Black patients received less care. And so when developing, using, and monitoring AI in healthcare, it is important to mitigate these kinds of risks. There are policy initiatives at both the state and federal levels that attempt to address these problems. For example, one law in Colorado prohibits insurance companies from use of data and algorithms in ways that result in unfair discrimination. And there's a pending bill in Illinois that requires that algorithms used for patient diagnosis be certified, shown to achieve accurate results. Moving on to education, this is another area in which AI tools are proliferating. One common promise for AI in education and training is expanding access, including to historically marginalized populations. Many also hope that AI can assist in the development of educational technologies that are tailored to individual learning needs and styles. For example, for students who need additional help in solving some mathematics problems, or for students who have English as a second language. But at the same time, there are familiar risks associated with AI in education, including over-reliance on technology, reproducing inequities, and privacy harms. And there are also risks that are specific to education, including risks related to teaching. The story to the left here illustrates an introductory computer science course at Harvard that plans to use artificial intelligence to grade assignments, teach coding, and personalize learning tips, which suggests that AI could potentially facilitate improved access, efficiency, and effectiveness. However, of course, AI systems can also cause problems for education. As I'm sure you know, there's been a lot of discussion about the impact of AI language models like ChatGPT on cheating. I know that I've had to deal with that in my own classes when I'm teaching. And in response, AI tools intended to detect AI cheating have been developed, but these produce both many false positives and many false negatives. The University of Illinois recently chose not to renew a contract with an online automated test proctoring program known as Proctorio, which often accused students who used screen readers, who talked to themselves during test taking, or who wore glasses during test taking of cheating. And in the case of AI anti-cheating tools that involve facial recognition, students of color might be subject to disproportionate rates of error, further exacerbating educational inequalities. If AI is going to improve education, it's important that AI tools be developed with the participation of both teachers and students. AI systems designed without input from, for example, teachers serving poor or marginalized communities, or without data from those communities, are more likely to recommend or deploy teaching interventions that are inadequate for poor or underserved students. Examples of education policy include a law in Mississippi that requires the State Department of Education to implement a mandatory computer science curriculum, including AI, and a bill in New York that would study the future of work, including AI in education and training. Moving on, one of the most widely discussed issues concerning AI is privacy. AI, particularly when combined with big data, can facilitate monitoring, surveillance, and in some cases, the identification of individuals. These capabilities offer new opportunities for law enforcement and the arrest of criminal offenders, or for financial institutions to detect fraud. And AI also has the potential to facilitate the development of privacy-enhancing technologies such as differential privacy. But at the same time, there are significant privacy risks associated with the monitoring and surveillance that AI can enable. For a few examples, AI tools have been used by governments and private companies to surveil both citizens and consumers in somewhat concerning ways. Following protests in the wake of the George Floyd murder, it was discovered that federal agencies were using facial recognition tools on protesters. And as we've seen, AI systems can make mistakes, particularly when trained on biased datasets. Many facial recognition systems have been trained disproportionately on lighter-skinned faces, in which case they make more mistakes when identifying darker-skinned patients. Detroit resident Portia Woodruff, who is a Black woman, sued the city of Detroit after being arrested for carjacking due to a false facial recognition match. At the time of the alleged carjacking and her 11-hour detention, Woodruff was 8 months pregnant, and 6 persons, all of whom are Black, report that they have been falsely accused of crimes as a result of Detroit's facial recognition systems. But it's not only government that can use facial recognition technology. According to another recent report, Madison Square Garden has used facial recognition technology in real time to identify lawyers who represent people suing it and to put them on an exclusion list to keep them out of concerts and sporting events. As described in the article on the right on this slide, personal injury attorney Kelly Conlon found this out when she tried to take her 9-year-old daughter to a Christmas spectacular at Radio City Music Hall and was turned away at the door. A couple of examples of policy in this area include the California Consumer Privacy Act and the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, both of which give individuals certain kinds of control over their biometric data, including data about their faces. The Illinois law, as I understand it, would prohibit private companies from doing what Madison Square Garden did in New York, for example. On to economic development. AI does have the potential to increase the efficiency and intelligence of business operations. Potential benefits include helping to identify alternative processes, suppliers, and product designs, and improving predictive capabilities such as predictive maintenance and personalized marketing. Many of the risks in this area are ones that we've seen in other areas already, and in addition, vulnerability to cyber attack can be a significant risk with increasing dependence on automated systems. Particularly, of course, for businesses that don't invest in cybersecurity or have limited resources in that area. For a few specific examples, companies including Boeing have used AI to review experiment records to speed up alloy development and other manufacturing processes. And AI can also be used for predictive purposes, such as predicting when a manufacturing process might be on the verge of failing so that preventative measures can be taken. The pictured article from Forbes highlights a number of potential benefits of AI, including sales forecasting, personalized advertising, and the generation of marketing materials. But at the same time, many within the business community have warned about the risks of bias and over-reliance on AI. We've seen problems associated with bias before, and they can affect AI used in business operations as well. Amazon, for example, attempted to streamline its hiring process by using AI to screen job applications, but found that the hiring algorithm it had developed was biased against women. This bias was introduced by the data used to train the system, data that reflected the fact that Amazon's applicants and employees for these positions were disproportionately male. And when companies use AI to assist in critical decision-making, such as decisions about hiring, it is essential that there be policies and processes that reduce the risk of bias, discriminatory impact, and otherwise inadequately trained systems. Some examples of economic development related to AI policy, both Georgia and Massachusetts had implemented funding for industrial AI development and implementation. The Georgia policy here provides part of the funding for the Georgia AI manufacturing project under which I am employed. One of the most hotly debated issues related to AI concerns impacts on jobs in terms both of the number of jobs and the types of jobs that will be available. But many Americans do fear that their jobs could be eliminated by AI. Others respond that AI is likely to create jobs, not just in computer science and engineering, but in areas that require the skills of working with AI. And both these hopes and these fears are understandable. AI is likely to increase demand for some sorts of jobs and decrease demand for others. And at this point, we simply don't know what the overall impact of AI on jobs numbers will be. But it is clear that AI is disrupting the labor market, shifting demand for various jobs, the skills that are required to excel in them, and working conditions. One potential example of how AI can improve working conditions relevant to Georgia is the automation of chicken deboning, which often leads to repetitive use injuries as well as acute injuries sometimes. More generally, AI-enabled sensors could be used to detect safety hazards, and augmented reality systems could be used to train workers to perform new tasks. And as we've discussed, AI could potentially increase productivity and the efficiency of business operations, which could lead to increasing demand and, in turn, more jobs. Really, the impact of AI on jobs will depend in large part on how AI systems are designed and used in government. They could be designed in inclusive ways to enhance rather than replace human workers. For example, AI could be designed to help workers set their own schedules and create work-life balances that are particular to their own circumstances. However, AI could also be designed and used in rather different ways to facilitate intrusive surveillance practices. And so, as in other areas, efforts are needed, including at the policy level, to ensure responsible governance of AI. Two examples of state-level policy initiatives related to jobs include a future of work task force in Illinois to study the impact of AI on industries and jobs, and a proposed bill in New Jersey that would require unemployment benefits applicants to report whether their job loss was related to automation or other technological advances. Final area that I'll discuss is AI in government, about which we've already heard a lot. Many of the opportunities and risks of using AI in government are similar to ones that we've already seen. AI has the potential to make government operations more efficient, to decrease service costs through automation, to increase service personalization, and to enhance security and law enforcement. And many of the risks associated with AI in government are familiar as well. There are two ethical and political values, however, that I haven't mentioned previously, and which are important to highlight in the context of government, namely transparency and democratic participation. If AI systems are used by governments, especially if they're used in such a way as to have direct impacts on the lives of citizens, then it's essential that those systems be transparent and interpretable, including by the people who are impacted by them. And to the extent that AI can have impacts on democratic norms, institutions, and participation, it's crucial that we have policies that protect these ideals. We've already heard a lot from Dustin about applications of AI in government, and I have a few examples as well. Government entities, including at the federal level, are experimenting with AI systems to increase efficiency of operations. For example, the U.S. State Department, Justice Department, and CDC have tested, with mixed results, machine learning tools to fulfill backlogged Freedom of Information Act requests. But as noted, it's important that AI systems used for such purposes are transparent. A class action lawsuit has been brought against the state of Idaho for its use of an algorithm to calculate Medicaid benefits for citizens with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And last year, a federal judge ruled against the state's use of the algorithm, and specifically against the state's attempt to deny Medicaid recipients from seeing how the algorithm works. Now, the last image that I'm going to show, and you may have seen it already, relates to the use of AI in politics. It has implications for transparency, but it has much broader implications as well, including for democratic governance and participation. Here we can see AI-generated deepfakes disseminated by the Ron DeSantis campaign in his primary battle with Donald Trump over the summer, falsely depicting Trump embracing Anthony Fauci. This picture here, I guess my mouse isn't visible, but the three fakes are labeled as fake in this picture. Then they're collaged together with three real pictures. While the responsible development and use of AI can improve access to information, the unethical use of AI is creating new possibilities for deception, which could impede the ability of citizens to participate effectively in democratic processes. And so this is an area where policies may be needed to protect democratic institutions. Thus far, the policy initiatives that I provided have been at the state level, and there's another one here, establishing an advisory council on advanced technology and AI to the governor of Alabama. And at the federal level, the Biden administration has been advancing policy efforts related to AI as well. Last year's executive order on AI directs the Secretary of Commerce to establish guidelines and best practices for the development and deployment of safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. While these guidelines would be voluntary for some AI developers, they would impose requirements on AI systems used by the federal government, including testing to mitigate the kinds of biases we've seen illustrated over the course of this presentation. To wrap up, I want to emphasize that AI is here to stay, but that its impacts, both good and bad, are not yet fully defined. If we want to take advantage of the opportunities I discussed and to mitigate the risks, now is the time to act through public and private policymaking, community organization, and even technology design and development itself. There's an urgent need for organizations dedicated to serving the public interest to develop competence both in working with AI and for shaping its possible impacts both within their own operations and in the wider world. I'll finish there, and I would be happy to take some questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any in the chat just yet, but I'm sure a few may be coming. We do have a few minutes. Great presentation. Thank you so much. Just give y'all a minute here. All right, we've got a question here. Are the examples of student groups and community organizations working to ensure the safe use of public-facing AI?
You said could I go
Oh, are there examples of student groups and community organizations that are working to ensure the safe use of public-facing AI?
I'll say yes, certainly there are. I cannot name any specific examples at the moment. One example from the presentation that may be relevant to that question was this example. The ACLU has been quite active in investigating use of algorithms in government and, frankly, in bringing lawsuits when they think that they've been used inappropriately.
Excellent. Great. Any other questions? Oh, here we go. Have there been any governments that have proactively used AI to address equity issues rather than reacting to instances of AI-infused inequity?
That's a pretty broad question. I think I'll say, as Dustin mentioned, that a lot of government use of AI is sort of just getting off the ground now. I know that a lot of folks in government hope that, for example, AI could be used to reduce the cost of government services, which could have equity implications. But in terms of a specific instance of use, I don't have any examples for you now.
Well, that makes sense because it is, especially to local governments, it's a very new development. Okay, well, thank you so much, John. Are there any other questions? Final call for questions? Oh, here's one more. Some issues with racial biases in AI use outside of the USA. Do you have any examples of biases being used outside the US, I think is the question.
No specific ones. I will say our project focuses on the US context specifically, and even more specifically on Georgia. And so that is sort of the extent of my use. I will say that a lot of the issues a lot of the causes of racial disparities in AI used in the US would be the same when applied elsewhere or even intensified. A lot of, for example, facial recognition systems are developed in the US and also in Europe, using mostly databases of largely light-skinned people. And so, of course, if those same tools are taken and used in a nation or in an area where most of the citizens have dark skin, those tools are going to perform worse.
Yep, that makes total sense. All right, well, thank you so much, Mr. Nelson. We appreciate you sharing your experience with us. And now we will move on to the more local government section of this webinar. And now I'd like to introduce Katie Leggett, who is the CIO at the City of Woodstock, Georgia.
Hi there. Thank you for having me today. Let me get my screen pulled up. I only have the one slide, so. Maybe.
Oh, we're not seeing it yet for some reason.
Try that again.
Second time's the charm.
Katie, maybe you can pull it up for me.
Okay, I will do my best. If you want to start talking, I will find it while you do that.
Thank you. Absolutely. It's just an intro slide. I don't actually have slides, so it doesn't really matter. Like Katie said, I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Woodstock. For those who are not familiar with Woodstock in Georgia, we are about 30 miles north of Atlanta. We're about 13 square miles. We're about 40,000 people. So we're a relatively small town in terms of, metropolitan Atlanta. We are a pretty dynamic city. We're a Georgia Plan First community. We're known for our really vibrant downtown, our world-class parks and trails. We have some really famous mountain bike trails. We're home to a lot of really small businesses. We're home to some regional shopping and tourism. If you like music, we have a free summer concert series that pulls 10 to 14,000 people a concert. So if you ever wanted to see someone like Everclear or Charlie Daniel Band or Rick Springfield, we've had them in the past. So thank you, Katie. I appreciate you. So I want to give you some background on our city before I jump into our conversation, so you guys have kind of a primer for what I'm going to talk about. So our city government consists of all of the usual municipal departments. We've got community development, parks and recreation, IT and GIS. We've got public works, police, fire. And in addition, we have our own utilities. We have water, sewer, and stormwater that the city runs themselves. We employ more than 200 employees, and we pride ourselves on being bold, collaborative, and authentic. So we're always open to have conversations with citizens, with other municipalities, and that's really a big feather in our cap. We are definitely lauded for our sense of that small town feel, but with a big town attitude. We really enjoy, talking to people and being personable and limiting that red tape wherever we can. Just recently at our most recent council planning retreat last month, our city defined a brand new mission and vision statement that better reflects our current commitment and goals. Our mission is to build a city that feels like home, and our vision is to boldly pursue what's next to build a thriving community. Our city management team has historically made data-driven decisions, and they always have their eyes on the future. We have numerous long-term plans that are already in place, that have been in place for years now, and that are continuously updated. We have a comprehensive plan, a sustainability plan, a smart Woodstock master plan, a transportation master plan. That is actually our newest plan that we never had before, but that one has actually been one of the most impactful ones, where we made a plan ahead of time and then we're executing it as we can, and then we keep adopting new changes to it. So using these long range plans and keeping them up to date has proven to be one of the more foundational pillars in our city's success. Being able to make a plan, do the research, follow it. We've been able to streamline our goals and decision making. So there's a lot of agreement amongst our elected officials and our city management team because of those plans. So I tell you all that to say that it is incredibly important to our city to plan first and then act. And it's important for us to be hyper intentional with our actions and to make swift decisions, even if they fail. We are consistently making decisions that are based on previous research and existing plans. And honestly, any citywide AI implementation will be no different. So for the topic of the day, unfortunately, all I have today to talk about is problems. I usually don't like to come to the table with only problems and no solutions, but AI is such a new topic that we haven't, as a city, had time to figure out what that means for us. But we know that, like like was said prior, it's not going away. It's here to stay, for better or for worse. And we want to be part of the conversation as early as possible. Anyone with any background or experience with government knows that it takes government a super long time to catch up on the trends. Just in the last few years, quote unquote, the cloud is no longer a dirty word. And many organizations are implementing some kind of hybrid or full cloud deployment in their situation now, which did not exist. Cloud computing has been around for literal decades. So I'm not surprised the government is interested in AI, but we don't know how to implement it safely or efficiently. And just as a point of clarity, my focus today on my discussion will be for the internal use of AI for our city staff, not how our citizens should use AI in their private lives. So I'd like to speak as on a couple of high points of our concerns that we have with AI moving forward. So in my capacity as CIO for Woodstock, I'm the director of IT and GIS. So all of the tech needs come through us. So when we talk about AI, I instantly talk about security. Like, how can I keep everybody safe? And I mean everybody. I mean our elected officials. I mean our city staff. I mean our infrastructure. I mean our servers. I mean everything. How do we do this safely? And what does that mean? So yes, cybersecurity is a very easy, low-hanging fruit to consider. How do I stop people from putting bad things into bad places? Yes. But also, how do I help my employees use this correctly so they're protecting themselves? Generally, I would pick something like an enterprise deployment, something where I can control the logins. And so our employees only have to remember one password. Or if I can enforce something like a multi-factor authentication that forces them to confirm that they are who they say they are before using something. So how do I help secure my organization with access to something like an AI solution? And I feel like we should have had a ticker for all of our presentations for how many times we mentioned ChatGPT, because I'm going to mention it a lot. So one of the most common AI tools that I've seen in my organization is obviously ChatGPT. And for those who have used OpenAI's ChatGPT, you know that to access it, you have to log into it. So that is our first immediate problem. So to log in, you have to use your Microsoft account, your Google account, or your Apple account, which is great that they offer all three. However, from an enterprise organization, that's a little scary because I don't want people using their personal accounts to do city business. And in order to get a business account for ChatGPT, you have to be part of ChatGPT Enterprise, which based on either my organization's size or the availability of it, we are not eligible for that level right now. So that's not something that we've been able to take advantage of yet. However, back in August or back in January, they just released a brand new ChatGPT for Teams, which we're actually currently evaluating to see if we can get that in our next fiscal year budget. But my point in saying all this is I need that path to be able to help my employees access something securely and not use their personal information to do city work. You know, everyone has got that line between personal life and government work because that's an important line to hold. And it's important for my employees to have that line too. I don't want them to blend that if they're not comfortable with it. So I need some kind of a path that allows me to secure their environment so they can do what they need to do instead of just having open free reign. The other issues that we have are, policy. I'm in government, so of course I want to have a policy adopted so that everything that we do is protected from misuse. And the way that we would view something like this specifically is in two different lights. It's either acceptable use and restrictions, what you can and cannot do and what the repercussions are if you do it wrong, or creating guardrails, or what I'm calling the sandbox, where you're creating an environment with explicit rules and explicit considerations that you need to take for safe testing and experimenting and make recommended use cases. So in reality, the policy that we would probably adopt to create a safe space for our AI for our city is probably a blend of the two. A little bit of protection, a little bit of repercussions, but like ultimately a guideline to tell people how they should be using this in a safe manner. So for example, if we pick the acceptable use route and say you're allowed to use something like the generative text, like ChatGPT, and the repercussions for using it incorrectly or malevolently, how do you enforce something like that? Like if you have a policy in place and you tell people like, okay, you can't put your name or your position or your address into this thing, and then they do it anyway, I don't see how that's enforceable unless you are constantly monitoring every piece that goes into ChatGPT, which isn't feasible. But so if you're not able to force or require people to log in a specific way and track that from an administrative standpoint, you're going to have to catch someone red-handed for them to be in violation of the policy. So if that's the case, what's the point of the policy? So the other side with the sandbox is more, I call it fluffy policy. It's less about you need to act this way or else. And it's more, I know this is scary. Here's a lane that you need to be in, and here are the considerations that you need to make while you're here. And I'm more of a fan of that direction because, you know, it's reaching a hand out to those people who want to do it and don't know how and don't know what the safe way is to do it. But to do that, we have to know everything first. And that's kind of the hard part. Is there's so much to it, and it depends on what solution you pick. That policy can't be a beast, or it's not going to get used appropriately. The last part that I have is I'm calling our privacy and kind of our third party policy. And you know, Dustin touched on it earlier about his procurement and making sure that people are being open about when they're using AI. So generative text seems to be the easiest thing to talk about because it's the most accessible. Most of the people you know have used ChatGPT. I've used ChatGPT. My coworkers, my husband, my friends, my retired parents have used ChatGPT. So it's everywhere. Whether you're using it to draft emails, plan a vacation, meal prep, or write actual pieces of code, it seems that it's the easiest version of AI that everyone can get to. So in IT specifically, we deal with a variety of technology and different requirements, right? So we've got firewalls and endpoint antivirus and spam filters for email and mobile device management systems and criminal justice requirements. So most, if not all of these things are managed by services that we pay someone else for. Like we manage our firewall, but our firewall has a vendor, or we have antivirus that we purchase through somebody else. So almost all of those services have an AI component that you can get for an upcharge, of course. So personally, I think firewalls have some of the most immediate and important applications of AI. Imagine a firewall learning about an imminent cyber attack in a nearby location, like a city or county nearby. And it is able to use that AI component to automatically adjust your organization's firewall settings without your physical team members needing to do it manually to automatically protect your organization from an attack. That is immediately useful. I have a very petite IT team with the city of Woodstock. That makes a ton of sense to me. A person, I think that email spam filters also have a very similar trajectory where, or even antivirus installed on your organization's computers. If they can learn from things that are happening around it to better protect you, that makes a ton of sense. And we can see all of the potential effectiveness in AI. Our hesitation comes from, how are we protecting our data that goes into that specific vendor's AI? Now, a lot of vendors recently have made a big to-do about saying like, hey, if your data goes into this with this certain license level, we aren't learning from your data. Fantastic. Does that impact my output then if I'm not sharing to the greater database? So those are questions I would have for a lot of different vendors for a lot of different people. Or if we have a security camera that uses AI to inspect the footage, how do we know what that AI is going to use our data for in the future? Are we okay as an organization putting our potentially secure data, depending on what kind of security footage it is, into their proprietary AI for it to learn off of to make better results? This is a lot of crazy questions, and that could balloon very quickly into a lot of strict things. So if we need to find a new solution to something, how are we evaluating the different kinds of ways that vendors use AI? So I actually got the privilege of hearing the same presentation a couple months ago at the Emerging Trends Conference in Atlanta. And because of that conversation, I've already had conversations with our finance department about altering our procurement policy to require vendors to disclose any AI functions so we can ask more questions about it. Because right now people are just kind of lumping it into the solutions, and that's not always helpful. So should we be requiring vendors to do that? Probably. It's tough to say because maybe they don't have one, or maybe it doesn't matter. I think that's my final question is that, does it matter? And how do I help? I just want to help, which is fantastic. And we have a great team who's willing to go the extra mile to figure it out. We just don't know where to start. We have all of these concerns about privacy and making sure that everyone understands what AI is in the way that we had to describe that the cloud is someone else's computer. We need that same kind of jargon to share with everybody. So my question is, does it matter? And what can I do next? So I want to find ways to bring our city employees up to speed on safe use while also providing a safe place to use it in. I want to be able to describe to our mayor, our council, our city management how the data is being used without a shadow of a doubt. There needs to be no confusion on our transparency. I want to know so much more than I know right now, but I don't want to inhibit our growth in the process of learning. So last month, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, came out with their first ever AI risk management framework. If I had to guess, once we start making strides toward this, we will probably default to their framework as our own foundation, because we do that for a lot of criminal justice standards. They've kind of set the bar in terms of security. I need to be able to answer so many more questions that I don't even know to ask yet. So my focus will be on how do we safely deploy any kind of city-centered solution without just barring it outright first, because I think that's going to do us a disservice. That's all I have today. Thank you guys for listening to me complain. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was great and full of a lot more information than just questions. We're going to hold, for this section, we're going to hold questions until after our next speaker is done speaking, because we believe that he's got maybe some answers from the government perspective. So now I'd like to introduce Mr. Clay Pearson. Thank you so much for being here, Clay. And looks like, there we go. Excellent.
Can you hear me all right, Katie?
Sure can. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the invite. It's fun to be here. I always learn. Just with the time we have, I want to give a little bit more of maybe an organizational and environment, economic background perspective. I've been in local government myself for 30 years, just transitioned now with strategic government resources. And so my objective is going to try to share some context, some big picture back thinking, and then some resources for you. So going into this, I had all these aspirations. I've seen these gorgeous AI generated images of a train station and a library. It looks like a Rembrandt. So I figured I'd do something for this presentation. And this is what I came up with, which is utterly ridiculous. So I share that not to diminish everything else I'm about to say, but just to share and show that we're on this learning expedition together. I think we need to be open and explore and try things and be willing to put up dumb pictures like this for ourselves. So it's not the app's fault, but this is what I use to generate that somehow. So I was at a Rice University lecture this week, and it was the Google chief scientist, and really have to say it made me feel optimistic about AI, which I wasn't really expecting. And just the energy, the science behind it. There's a lot of discipline. The people that are building these things are, I think, very thoughtful and trying to do the right thing. But this just shows the rapid explosion of the AI technology. Back in 2011, which wasn't that long ago, there's a contest for recognition of images, and the accuracy then was the first one they showed was 50% accuracy. Just 2 years later, using these neural net technologies and methods, and there were only two. It was the first time a neural net had been used, and I don't understand all the technology behind that, but that's the basis for the AI as I understand it now. It improved all the way up from 51% to 63%. Fast forward 10 years later, the technology, you can see the gray dots are the number of entries in this contest, but the accuracy goes to 91%. So you can see this explosion, and that's all around us, and it kind of gives some efficacy to that. Also, I want to share, for me, I listen to to something like $300 a share last March, and it was a huge thing, and it showed the market move and the economy paying attention to this thing called AI. And there's a great article in New Yorker. If you don't have access to that, just drop me an email and I'll send you this with my very helpful highlights there. But talked about NVIDIA stock and that chip journey. And just really fascinating, I think, for both learning about the technology and what's the basis for this, and also, corporate organizational sort of progression with that. It's a great story of an immigrant who comes, and company was going bankrupt. They had to lay off half the staff, but they believed in their product and went all in on AI and these chips. And here we are. And NVIDIA, look, today was $700. I'm not smart enough. I didn't buy it at 100, 300, or 700. So one of the resources I want to share, if you're not already tuned in, is this is Gartner. It's a private, mostly private industry focused, but they do have sections. They do quite a bit with the government space. But they publish these hype cycles, which I think is kind of important and a good method to think about any technology. And if you see at the bottom there, they would say that any technology that shows on this scene, it starts in this innovation trigger, but then it quickly goes up, and you get these inflated expectations. And we've all seen that. And then right after that, it plunges down to the trough of disillusionment. You hear all the hype, and this is going to change the world. And then there's a steady climb back. Reality checks in, and everybody figures out everything. And then it's like it's an enlightenment. You figure out what's real, and then it's actually you get to a plateau of productivity. So they would show that the technologies follow this sort of thing, and you've all seen this happen. And I just think it's a cool way of thinking about things. And you can see this one, particularly, they showed this thing called artificial general intelligence was in that innovation trigger in 2023. And this isn't something I've not seen. Between 2022 and 23, the AI leapt from that initial innovation trigger all the way up to the inflated expectations. Usually it's a 5-year run to run through that, and it moved over in a year, and just shows you all the extreme energy, ideas, hype behind all that. So this is the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation, and I want to make a pitch for a resource here. Arizona State has a really good initial certificate in digital inclusion, which I'd encourage you to take a look at. Arizona State's legit. They've got a very good disciplined program. I think it's 6 modules. You can pick one or do the whole thing. They've got a lot of good learning there and trying to think and how we apply this. And I also want to say we can't forget about, we talk about AI, but if people don't have broadband and access to the internet, that doesn't matter in most anything else we're talking about. So we have to keep our eye on that ball, I believe, strongly. I also think about the friction from the digital interfaces. Katie said her parents or in-laws use that, but I think about my mother-in-law, and can she access and use our interfaces that we are creating in technology space easily? Are we creating these barriers to inclusion unnecessarily with complicated interfaces? I would argue and suggest and hope you feel like AI actually has the potential to make that friction less, but it is something that we have to be thoughtful about and not just plow into. So the other thing I think about in terms of our organizations, we've got all these AI applications. You're going to get all these insights into the data, but it's not going to do anybody any good unless we're using that and changing our routines, our habits. I mean, what if there was a fire department that had a daily run sheet, and they run it through AI and they get some insights about what the different station mix was in terms of their activity, any lags in response time or turnout time, all the things that we should be paying attention to. But if you get these insights from AI or anything really, and nobody's using it or doing anything differently, it does absolutely diddly squat good. And so I would argue and ask us to think about how we make the transition from information to knowledge to action. And I would suggest too, there's lots of ways of doing that. City stat and those kinds of model routines, going back to the police, New York Police Department routines, where they met daily and looked at data. You don't have to be that formal, but I think that's just critically important, and bringing people along on that that exploration. On the right is something that I was really proud of, and we used in when I was the city manager in Pearland, Texas. Here, we had a biweekly little spark chart there. It just showed a bunch of indicators of police and fire activity, and I got this biweekly. Sometimes I just note it. More often than not, I ask the police or fire chief a question and say, hey, just explain to me why this ticked up or down, or what's going on, or why this trend is happening. And I think there's tremendous value in the habit and routine of looking at a material like this and then asking questions. Frankly, if the chiefs know that you're looking at this and asking some questions, they're going to pay attention to that. Their lieutenants are going to pay attention to that, on and on and on. So you've got to build up these sort of habits and routines of taking the information and thinking about what you're going to do with them, or it's all for naught. So on the right here is another one of my favorite busy graphs, but it shows the systems we had in Pearland from an IT perspective. And you can see most any city organization is going to have something very similar. We've got all these different pockets of information and data and that individual departments are using. Some of them are linked to others. Your permit department probably has an interface with the finance system for the revenue, et cetera. And then maybe GIS, floats over a lot of these different things. I would argue that we talk about the Internet of Things, we should talk about the GIS of everything. But we've got all these things. I know, hopefully Katie would agree that, trying to pull these informations together and so they reinforce each other. And, you can draw information from these rather than signing out of one app and going into another one, and, maybe using Power BI to try to extract things from these in a sense. I think AI's got tremendous potential to pull these together. And that's one of the many things I'm excited about this space and how it might be used. So, not a shill for any particular company, but I just know Polymorphic is an example of one of the firms out there where they are doing these, and I believe it was referenced earlier by Dustin and maybe others, that where you can have a AI that's confined space, meaning for your organization and all your different systems. And it can give citations for answers that way. It can give you a trusted source so that it's not pulling from a different city or Timbuktu kind of different location. It gives you real hyper local information that's trusted, and there's tons of options for that. So I think that's one of the things that we should all be thinking about and looking about, is how we can, maybe this is the holy grail of information science and technology and data and operations, that we can use an AI kind of basis to pull this together, to answer questions, so that we're not getting surprised by conflicting information or anything like that. I think another big thing, picture, is think about, and there's tons here, I'm not going to have time to go into, I just want to tease you with that. I think there's a lot of value in scenario planning, and the University of Houston has a whole discipline certificate on that. That's also available through the Alliance for Innovation. I'm working with them on upcoming programs, but they are doing some work with different cities now, I know, about AI. But thinking about the future and giving you insights into the possibilities in a disciplined, organized way, I think has a lot of power. And I'd encourage you to at least consider, how you look at the future and framing it, and not just be a cork bobbing on the ocean, but instead, sort of steering your ship. Katie talked about, their plans and then action. I think there's tremendous value and necessity for us to be doing that, because we could all get distracted with the shiny thing of the day. I think this kind of scenario planning gives us a firm way of thinking about and handling the future. So next, I'm going to step back and encourage a big organizational change management perspective to AI or most anything. Typically, we take an organizational perspective when we roll out something. We say that here's our current state, here's all these processes, blah, blah, blah. We're gonna have transition state, and then magically we're gonna move into an ideal future state and everything will be perfect. We know that's not the case. And it's important to think about in a disciplined way with change management that change is personal. I mean, I've pretend like I love change and so forth, but I'm old, and so I remember learning Quattro Pro as my software spreadsheet program, and this thing Excel came along, and I didn't want to change. So it happens to me too. But we need to keep in mind and realize and understand that change is very personal, and for the individual, it's how they do their job today, and then how are they going to do it in the future. And so we can't just be imposing these changes, whether it's AI or anything else, without thinking about that. And our organizations are made up of lots of individuals who have their own individual current states and future states, and so we've got to ponder, and there is resources available for change management, communication, all those kinds of things, and we should do that in a thoughtful way, not a ad hoc other kind of way. We've all heard, and we've been a part of, when we don't take into consideration the people side of change. These are all the things you get, and you've probably experienced when you implemented a new ERP or something else like that. I always thought it's funny when I started out that there was people had been around the organization for a while, and they said if there's another ERP that came out, they were going to quit. They weren't going to start being down that road because they'd been through it once or twice. And 30 years later, after I've been through this, I might be in that same camp, I'm afraid. So I love this Drucker quote, and I think it's apropos to this. Only three things in organizations happen naturally. Those are friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. So, we have to be purposeful. We have to lead. We have to be bold and strategic, and we have to bring people along on that expedition of any kind of a change. And if you'll permit, with my remaining minutes here, you're in Atlanta, most of y'all, or Georgia area. Just down the road in Florida and Tampa in April is going to be a tremendous opportunity. I've been involved with the Alliance for Innovation as a volunteer board member for a decade plus. It's a great organization. They have a opportunity where forward-thinking, leading-edge organizations come together, and that'll be in Tampa in April. I encourage you to take a look at that. There's a lot of tremendous people and organizations there that you'll be able to learn from, and so hope to see you over there in Atlanta. So that is all I have, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clay. That was great. And it looks like you've got some links in your slides there. So I believe we'll be able to send these slides out with the video after the event. So thank you. And in order to stay on track, we've got one question in the Q&A, but I'm going to have to leave it here for now. Hopefully, Clay, maybe you can answer it while our next speaker is speaking. But I just want to go ahead and keep on track. So next we have Sasha Anderson. Thank you so much for being here. She is guest faculty at the University of Washington Information School and an AI technology expert based on what I've heard from her so far. So we are great to have you here today, Sasha, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Fabulous. Thank you, Katie. I'll get my slides up here in a second, but just to introduce myself. Hi, hello. It's still morning my time. It's almost, well, I guess we're still morning your time too. I'm all mixed up. I was up early today. I'm here in Seattle, Washington. I'm wearing my University of Washington hat today, but I do a lot of things and I've taken a winding path in my career. But I want to say for the purposes of this conversation is I started in local government and I fell into doing data and technology in government. And that has been my career ever since. So incredibly passionate about what the private sector can achieve. And I understand the unique kind of constraints and opportunities that you face working in local government. Let's see, what else should I share? So teach at University of Washington. I do consulting with local governments around data, technology, and increasingly AI projects. and I just joined the Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley. I'm running their Data Skills for Policymakers program. So we are looking at upskilling opportunities for the public sector workforce. The first of our programs is something called Data Skills for Congress. That is a program that I helped launch last year, and we're training congressional staff in data, and this year we're training them in data and AI. So a little plug before we get started, but we have one more week of recruitment for that program. So if anyone in your network is working in Congress right now and would benefit from a program like that, it is free. And I will paste a link to it in chats probably after this presentation. So let me get some slides pulled up here.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Making sense of AI, making AI make sense. Here's a little bit about my bio. I just introduced myself. There's a LinkedIn link and my email if you'd like to contact me after. I'm sure Katie will be sharing these decks with you all. Here's some photos of my lovely students at University of Washington. This is us doing storyboarding. I teach the capstone class there. So for informatics students, it's their final project showcasing their skills. So we're building real products and we're dealing with a lot of the issues that we're talking about today when we're doing that work. What do we mean when we say AI? I know we just listened to 2 hours of people talking about AI, but I asked that question because oftentimes, like if you Google for like images to try and put in a slide deck like this about AI, these are the types of images that you get. I love this one. It's just like numbers exploding out of someone's head. We've made it seem so mysterious and like it's something brand new that we haven't encountered before. And I know it does seem to some extent new and magical, but in reality, I think it's we're starting to get a little closer with this picture. I wish we could use terms that were a little more honest about what's actually going on here, because we have not achieved like generalized artificial intelligence that entails all the things that a human brain does and can do. I wish we used terms more like machine-enabled pattern recognition, right? For the most part, that's what we're doing. We're using the capabilities of a computer to do like more, better, faster data processing than existing programs that we had before. Katie was talking about, I wish I had a way to explain this to mayors, city councils, public officials who are not technologists. This is probably not the slogan for AI, right? Like MEPR is not the best acronym, but we can be thinking about how we can explain this and not let things slide under the cover of the magic of AI. So when I think about the types of AI we can create in the public sector, again, we've just gone over many examples. Just want to offer this framework to you that I came up with. I'm thinking about there's anticipatory AI, looking at what's happened in the past, what might happen in the future. You can look at that for things like traffic planning, healthcare staffing, generative AI, which is really having a moment right now. Can we use AI to draft text for legislation, to offer chatbot experiences? And then decisive. So can we use AI to automate complex decision-making processes? So it's maybe resource allocation. Our previous speaker mentioned scenario planning. So those are the 3 things I'm thinking about. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? So this is a pivotal moment for cities to be thinking about what kinds of AI do we stand for and by and want to see implemented in our cities, and what don't we? Like it's a wonderful time right now to be a leading voice here in thinking about what we should and shouldn't be building, because we know the issues are numerous, right? We oftentimes think about the privacy and security aspect. Governments are particularly sensitive to that because they face a lot of legal constraints that they have to meet. But there are many, many issues with these technologies, and we can be thoughtful about how we approach them. So I want to share 2 stories with you quickly, mindful of time, but some things that have been sticking in my head around this topic. So the first story is I'm part of a Metro Lab has this group called the Task Force on Generative AI for Local Governments. It's a really lovely group of people who have come together, and we're developing policy guidance for cities around generative AI. So keep an eye out for that to be hopefully published later in 2024. But because of being in that network, I get the opportunity to talk with a lot of CTOs and CIOs and hear what they're thinking. And I was a bit surprised a few weeks ago when I was talking to a CTO and they told me, and I won't say, who or where, but it was a pretty small city, was saying, hey, we're reviewing vendor proposals right now for a AI chatbot on our website that's going to, be better than search and people can query and get answers to their questions. And beyond discussion of, the capabilities of that and is that tech ready, they are thinking about spending $25,000 to $40,000 on this integration. And I have two thoughts. One, if residents knew, taxpayers knew, we're spending that much for something that has incremental value. I'm not sure in a small size city, like that is the way that we want to spend scarce resources, right? And then also we can take lessons from the past to think about what's going to happen with this technology. So remember, I was working in government 10 years ago, and I remember when everyone was, updating their websites, trying to look new and modern, and they were putting a lot of energy into on-site search, and then soon discovered that Google search was always going to be better at parsing their pages. And then a lot of websites did, Google search integration and kind of solved the issue. I think we can anticipate the same sorts of things happening with these AI tools, that I don't think we're that far out from OpenAI offering a chatbot integration onto your city's website, right? And so thinking about where it makes sense to spend money right now and where it doesn't. The second story that I want to share is calling back to, there's this through line, right, between like public data, public technology, and AI, and we're working along a continuum, and we have already had a number of hiccups with implementing technologies that relate to what we're trying to do with AI. So what do I mean when I say that? So for example, the state of Indiana, they had contracted with a vendor to redo their welfare eligibility and sort of participant management system. And in the rollout of that update and the automated decision-making process that was supposed to be, this fabulous update, they kicked thousands of people off of welfare, which was devastating for them. These were people with serious medical issues that were not able to afford care. People lost their houses because they didn't have their payments. Had huge repercussions for folks, right? And then it took them weeks, months to get back on. They didn't have a system set up to deal with, to troubleshoot these kind of issues, or what happens when the tech gets it wrong, right? And so it can have devastating consequences. When I have a longer amount of time with folks, we'll take 1 to 2 hours, and we will investigate some questions like this and do whiteboarding and be thinking about all those early questions we should be asking when it comes to technology selection and development for a government. But I'll just leave you with some of the questions that I like to ask, and I think they can be guiding questions for you. Why are we doing this? Will it make a measurable difference in someone's life? Is it worth spending money on, right? I worked in local government, and one thing that I always say from that time that I think surprises people outside of government is I say, hey, I worked with really smart, hardworking, creative, forward-thinking people, and I was so impressed with my colleagues. And I find that to be generally true, particularly at the local level, that it's why you're all here, right? We're all eager to learn, to try new things, to do it right. We want to do right by the public, be using all the tools that are available to us, but it's worth in this moment being careful about what we do and do not want to do. Asking the question of what is the unique value add that the public sector brings, right? So we have different constraints than a private company. So without the profit motive, like what can we be investing in working on? That can be things like more responsibility and inclusion focused AI, because we're looking at adding value in a different way. That's not just a profit model. And so we need to lean into that. We have the capability to explore in those areas. And then how are we going to measure success? What does fairness and equity look like? I'm going to talks like this constantly right now, and I hear cries of we need to combat bias, the tech needs to be fair, we need to have responsible innovation. But what does that actually mean? There's a case study that I really love, and maybe I can get Katie to include it when she sends out the slides, because it's in a PDF. I don't have a link for it, but it's a case study of in New York City, they contracted again with another vendor to build them a bail determination system. Should someone be out on bail, or should they be in jail awaiting trial? And not being granted bail has, again, devastating consequences in someone's life. What's interesting about this is that the company swore up and down, like, we've tested it, it's fair, it has equal outcomes for all participants. And if you didn't dig a little deeper, you'd say, okay, great, you've tested it, we're good to go, we've met our standard, right? But ProPublica did a really great investigation of the data, and they came up with something very interesting about this bail decision system. They found that the company was right. It did have a similar rate of accuracy across racial groups, and we're going to look particularly at white people and Black people. But the thing is that they were, while they were correct or incorrect at the same rate, it was in the opposite direction. So they were more likely to, when they were incorrect about Black defendants, it tended to label them high risk. That was the incorrect decision. For white defendants, they inaccurately labeled them low risk, right? And so that isn't actually fair. And so this comes up too, and I'll get to this in a moment, thinking about AI registers, explainability, public transparency, public engagement, having a petition process. How can we make sure that these models are opened up, people understand the decisions that are being made about them? How are we actually scoring them? And then what happens if we get it wrong? So these are some ethical questions that we can be asking our teams. The old garbage in, garbage out model, the slogan for AI, if you have bad data going in or data that represents an unequal world, we're going to get the same situation reproduced on the other end. So what are our data inputs? What are assumptions about the world are we reinforcing? Who could be harmed by these decisions? And who could cause harm, either intentionally or unintentionally, by using something that we develop? These are questions I often ask of folks I work with. So what am I saying? You have my permission to pass in this moment. I know that we're all really excited, and it's not pass entirely on AI, but pass on certain types of AI. There's a lot of good work we can do, and there's a lot of work that we don't need to be getting into on the government side. I'm a data person, so my whole career has been dedicated to public data and using data to drive decision-making in the public sector. So I think for this moment, I'm really excited about using the AI conversation and money that's coming out to go back to fixing problems we already have, right? AI depends on data, both for the inputs to the systems and to assess the outcomes. And so we can funnel money right now into improving our public data systems to be able to connect to these AI systems. We can use this current moment to kind of get to work that we've already been needing to do. So that's one area of focus I find really interesting. I want to give you some useful tools. There's a lot of good work that's already been done in this area. I know NIST, the AI risk management framework, was already mentioned. It's a good place to look. Other resources, we have the Chief Data Officers Councils. We have those for both federal CDOs and state CDOs, the federal data strategy. Again, we can look to what we've done with data to speak to what we should be doing with AI. So look at their ethics framework. There's going to be a through line there as we're developing our own AI ethics frameworks. And then Library of Congress, I was really impressed to see they have published their AI planning framework. So as they're developing new AI projects, this is how they are going about it. I think that's really helpful to look at. They even have a questionnaire that you can take. So look to the resources that already exist. On the nonprofit side, we've got things like the Metro Lab task force that I mentioned is sitting on. Their guidance is going to be coming out. Beck Center has a lot of really great civic tech folks. They're thinking about AI right now. And then the AI Now Institute published this. This is probably the best 4 pages you could read about AI in this moment. Just a great document outlining all of the existing laws and resources and structures that we can lean on in this moment for AI development. We don't have to create it from scratch. And then what are we doing at the state and local level right now? AI registers, that's a huge one, right? We need to communicate to the public how we're using these tools, where, how, what decisions they're making, how you can engage with them. The only US city I know of so far that has one is San Jose, but there definitely could be more out there. Robust ones in Helsinki and Amsterdam, so recommend checking those out as a model. We can be developing our own AI scoring models for thinking about, again, what AI we should and shouldn't build in the public sector. And we can be thinking about technology restrictions and what are no-go areas and where do we decide to provide leadership in this area and say what we won't build, models for public engagement with developing AI, and then putting together processes for what happens if a decision's made on your behalf without a human involved, and do you have the ability to appeal that decision? So we can think about what systems and models look like for offering that alongside AI technology in government. On that, kind of those last couple points, I want to draw your attention to the fact that the EU AI Act was passed late last year. And one of the things that it did was it formalized technology risk levels. And they are developing different regulations based on the risk level of the technology that you're developing. So they want to be able to green light things that they're like, yes, that's benign, go for it. They are defining things that they say you can't build at all. And then if you're at high risk, what do you need to be doing to mitigate harm? And so I think you can use that framework in your own work, be thinking about what you want to designate on those 3 levels. And you can also be keeping an eye on, because we know European regulation tends to move faster than US. And so they lead globally in this area. So companies will be following this and adapting products to adhere to it. So by keeping an eye on this, I think that will be really helpful for developing your own approach. My kind of take on it is just AI shouldn't have the ability to change someone's life. That's the kind of high risk, unacceptable risk technology that we can start to define as saying like, hey, we're not going to use it in these ways. But there's a ton of stuff that we can build, right? We can be improving casework management, automating meeting notes, applications for things. It can help us more quickly collect, clean, connect disparate data sets. We can be doing spatial analysis with it for things like infrastructure planning. A quick shout out, one organization I work with, World Enabled, is doing really cool work right now. I know this is the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation, and World Enabled is doing really great work right now. They are a disability focused and led organization, and they work with cities on inclusive projects. They have been focused a lot on physical infrastructure and urban planning. Increasingly, they're talking about digital infrastructure as well. But right now, they're doing a lot with AI. So they just wrapped a project with the city where they were using AI computer vision to do scans of city infrastructure to identify areas of improvement for accessibility. So things like, where do we need more clearance, better curb cuts, those sorts of things, and then using the AI to kind of auto-generate those recommendations. Very cool project. They're going to be publishing a report about it here soon. So they're a good one to talk to. They will probably have ideas for you. We can look at traffic flow prediction, like how can we increase engagement in public meetings and use AI to do that? How can we help people look up things? People are always trying to figure out like their local rental laws or zoning codes, right? There's a lot of like property laws that we can make it easier for people to find and understand. And then being the public sector, we can be developing our own models, whether they're foundation models that we would open source to someone else or specific implementations in the public sector. But now it's a time to be testing and sharing. So I just want to remind you, I know this is a gathering of academics and government folks. So let's talk about what motivates those 2 groups and where there might be common ground. So academics, they want to publish papers, right? They want to continue their research goals. They will be excited to have access to the novel data that you, cities, have. You have all these different databases, many of which are not shared publicly. But if proper precautions taken and data is anonymized, there's a lot of rich data that can be shared with academia that they will be very excited to play around with and get to geek out on. And academics are also focused on grant funding to further support their research activities. Governments, very different set of goals and motivations. Number 1, public trust, right? Want people to feel good about their local government, feel like it works for them and it's easy to work with. They want some good talking points. They want to be able to share the story of the work that they're doing. There's a lot of good work that's done that doesn't always get the recognition it deserves. They want to be legally compliant. Regulation is a big piece of this. And they are also searching for funding, usually federal funding. There's going to be a lot of funding coming out from the executive order on AI and other legislation for these projects. And cities will want to go after that, so they make sure they get some of it. So that's where you can meet in the middle, is on that funding piece. And so my kind of last bit of advice I would recommend is to take a look at the executive order on AI, because the aims of that are called out are probably what are going to guide funding, like in the future, right? So we can look at that and like think about what's probably coming down the funding pipeline. So some areas for exploration as you're thinking about projects to do together could be the safety and security of AI systems. Again, these are all called out in the executive order as goals. Job training and education on AI, advancing equity and civil rights, big one. I know there's a lot of interest there. Consumer protection, privacy enhancing technologies. And lastly, talent recruitment from underserved communities. So making sure that everyone is brought in, engaged, and benefits from this new technology development. I'll leave it at that. I know we're a bit over time, but Katie, hopefully you can share this deck out because I've left a lot of links in there for folks.
Absolutely, I will share this deck out. Thank you so much, Sasha. That was just really on point for this discussion. I love the part about the competing motivations for academics and government, and totally agree. I don't think we have time for a lot, and actually I don't see a question in the chat just yet. So thank you so much. So I am going to now transition on to the community research part of this event. And let me just share my slides. Okay. Again, thank you. And I really appreciate all of the conversations today about AI. Again, I'm Katie O'Connor, and I'm the Community Research Manager at the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation. The partnership is a public-private coalition that's catalyzing innovation for shared economic prosperity. Our work is supported and scaled by 4 pillars that use grant making, scaled programming, collaborative research, technology, and leadership development to build regional innovation and entrepreneurial hubs and mentors the next generation of innovators. So that's just a little bit about our overall organization, and I hope you'll check out our website to learn more if you're not familiar with us. But now I'm going to focus in a little bit on community research. So I manage our community research pillar. Community research, as we've talked about a lot today, really focuses on, matching up the communities and the researchers. So what is the problem in the community, whether that is transportation or housing or energy, and what is the multidisciplinary applied research that can be used to address that problem? So not only does the community get critical access to R&D that it wouldn't have otherwise had, but the research advances because it's being applied in the community with public engagement and valuable feedback from the local government. So PEN acts as a partner on some federally sponsored community research projects, and we also facilitate these projects through our grant program. The Community Research Grant Program provides funding to local government and university research teams to produce smart cities and civic innovation projects in the community. The application period is currently open now. Some of the services we can provide are help with even getting a proposal together, matching you with project partners to make sure your project's a success, and then helping you share that success through our marketing of your project. Including things like getting speaking engagements for you at conferences or helping to share your project best practices with other communities who could potentially benefit. We provide funding to local government and university research teams, and we hope there are other partners involved as well to make a really dynamic project team, including startups or community groups. The program began and is anchored in Georgia, but this year we're hoping to expand and include dynamic partnerships that reach across the southeastern United States with perhaps sister communities, new universities that we haven't worked with before. Part of my role is to help match up different partners together to create teams that will produce a strong proposal. And so that's part of the focus of the breakout discussions today. So if you're considering this program and you don't have all the partners in place that you need, I hope you'll reach out to me so I can help you make some connections to get a project done. There has to be a local government partner as a project lead because we're looking for applied research projects that are place-based and will benefit a specific community, helping to address that community's problems with local government leading the way. A strong research team will have multi-university partnerships, perhaps even partnerships with like a traditional research university working with smaller universities and community or technical colleges. To us, this is a part of inclusivity, a part of bringing technology access to those who have not had it so readily available, including researchers and students. What kind of projects? As I said, we're looking for projects that use technology to address community problems. Research that is applied in the community can be implemented by the local government and can be extremely impactful. And it's also a low risk way for the government to try something new. Because like, Sasha talked about before, they're maybe not spending a bunch of taxpayer money because we can provide the grant funding to allow them to try something out. This year's program theme is artificial intelligence, which is, why we focus this talk on AI today. While strict alignment with the program theme is not a requirement for selection, a proposal that does integrate AI into a project with substantial community impact is more likely to be selected this year. For these projects, we find it critical to incorporate community engagement and the rich feedback that it can give. So successful proposals will also incorporate a public engagement plan and have a site visit event at some point during the project. This photo that you can see here is from a community meeting for a 2022 project that we had in the Thomasville Heights neighborhood of Atlanta. That project used drones to evaluate energy efficiency in people's homes. And this was an event designed to educate the community about energy efficiency and also enroll them in the retrofit program. So for that project, the grant funding paid for the research activities, the community engagement, and for the simple energy retrofits for the 18 homes that were enrolled. So that's just one example of a community research project. And now this application period, like I said, is now open now until April 30th. And I've planned 2 webinars where I plan to share, more project examples, detailed information about who can apply, how to produce a strong proposal. And you're also welcome to schedule a meeting with me if you'd like to talk about an idea or get help finding partners. So now we're going to transition to the breakout session part of the event. And I'm putting in the chat as well. Okay. So let's see, for the last 45 minutes or so of this event, we have 5 different breakout rooms that are separate Zoom meetings. You receive the link to each of these meetings in your reminder email, so please feel free to join and switch rooms back and forth for the next 45 minutes. The topics for each room are focused on common community issues, and we hope you'll elaborate on how this issue, presents itself in your community. And we hope some of our research participants can begin to brainstorm ideas on maybe some applied research solutions. And please feel free to connect and exchange contact info with each other in the chats. We really hope that you will leave these breakout rooms today with some new connections made, new relationships. The sessions all have very knowledgeable moderators who will introduce themselves and the topic to keep the conversation going. And so thank you so much. Now I would like to release you all to the breakout rooms. Like I said, the links are in the chat. And I'm going to leave the webinar open for a while. So if anyone has any questions, I'll answer some questions in Q&A in the chat. But if you have any issues with the breakout rooms, come back and leave me a message here. So thank you all so much for being here.